Mr. Young has our prayer and pledge tonight. Mr. Young.
Please join me in a moment of silence. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Seats.
Good evening and welcome to Murfreesboro City Council, October the 1st. And tonight, council members, you have before you your consent agenda. But before we get to that, I want to introduce a very special person who has joined the city. We've had a little turnover in several of the departments, but we have a new employee, Glenn Godwin, who is our Assistant Personnel Director. Glenn, we're very pleased to have you, and he's been on the job for 4 days, and we haven't run him off yet. And so, Glenn, we're very pleased that you're with the city, and we look forward to working with you and having you work with our employees and making a difference. Thank you for being here. Thanks. All right, council members, you have before you your consent agenda if you've had an opportunity to review that. Are there any questions regarding the consent agenda?
Mayor, for no questions, I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, you have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. You also have before you the minutes of a regular meeting held August the 27th, 2009, a special meeting held September 17th, 2009, and a regular meeting held September 17th, 2009. If you've had an opportunity to review those minutes, are there any questions, additions, or deletions regarding the minutes of those meetings?
Mayor, hearing none, I move we approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider on third reading an ordinance amending Appendix C, the Employees Revised Pension Trust Agreement of the Murfreesboro City Code.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington. Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Also on third reading at this time, we'll consider an ordinance to amend approximately 72.0 acres of a PUD located along Rucker Lane.
So moved. Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time we'll consider on third reading an ordinance to rezone an area located along Agri Park Drive to Highway Commercial CH District.
Move for approval. Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Pass.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time on third reading, we'll consider an ordinance to amend .29 acres of a PCD and rezone .11 acres from RM16 to PCD for property located at the northeast corner of Hancock Street and East Castle Street.
Move for approval on third reading.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider recommendations of the Chief of Police requesting to develop and implement a teleserve section for the Murfreesboro Police Department. Chief Crispin, welcome.
Mayor and Council, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. I have on your agenda tonight one item for your consideration. For some time now, we've considered a recommendation that came out of our Chiefs Roundtable sessions from staff that we consider the implementation of what's being called a teleserve program. The 4 large cities in Tennessee already have programs like this, which are designed to redistribute the call load somewhat, particularly from those calls where citizens call into the police and need to file some type of a police report. Most often a report that where there's not evidence to be collected, there may be no witnesses to the particular type of incident that needs to be reported, and in many cases what the citizen needs is a report. The suggestion from staff had been that we investigate a teleserve program as a way of reducing call response, physical call response, if you will, in vehicles, and thereby use those resources more effectively for more serious responses to calls for service and those kinds of things. We believe that this program, once it's put in place, will do several things. We know that obviously these are different economic times than we've seen. We think that this will allow us to make the best use of the field resources that we have for responses to more serious calls. We believe that this will provide quick, efficient service to our citizens by letting them talk to a police officer on a telephone and be able to file a report by phone in those situations that we've described just a moment ago. And we also think that this will give us a more organized way of providing service to people that come to the police building and walk into the lobby who desire to file a police report. And in those cases, what ends up happening, unless we have somebody in the front lobby that's on a limited duty assignment, we end up having to call a police officer into the building to take those reports. We frankly believe that the savings in time spent calling police officers to the police building to file those reports or dispatching officers to those calls in the field, in those cases, as I described earlier, will represent a time savings for field units. We think that it will allow us to provide fast service to our citizens and frankly just use our resources more effectively. So that's the basis of the program. Conceptually, the program would be staffed with limited duty personnel when they were available. If we had someone who had been injured in the line of duty who the city manager approved for a limited duty assignment, they'd be able to fulfill these assignments more than likely 16 hours a day. We'd look to try to staff this from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. and 4 p.m. until midnight, thereabouts. That could be adjusted to be 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. and 2 p.m. until 10 p.m., just depending on the call loads. I don't anticipate that we would staff it over the midnight hours, simply because I don't think that the walk-in volume nor the call volume during those hours would make the most efficient use of those resources at that time of the day. In those cases where we did not have limited duty personnel that could fulfill that role, we'd simply staff someone there out of the uniform division to take those reports during that 16-hour-a-day period. This was actually something that we queried, if you will, or vetted with all of our uniform field division commanders and asked them, would you feel comfortable assigning an officer to come inside and take these kinds of reports, knowing that that would take a resource from the field during those hours? They all supported that concept, believing that it would more efficiently provide for that service delivery and frankly save them time in response to calls in the field for these types of service delivery. So generally that's the overall approach to what Teleserve is. As I said, we've patterned our effort after the program in Knoxville. Nashville also has a program similar to this, as does Chattanooga. On the second page of the material that was provided you, it shows an estimated project cost, which is about $12,000, with $5,500 of that being for some physical changes to the front office area off the main lobby in the existing police building. As requested, we would fund that out of our operation maintenance of buildings account in the current budget. The remaining expenses there, about $6,750 worth of additions to fixed assets, are not budgeted, and the city manager has graciously agreed to fund that out of unforeseen contingencies with the approval of the council, of course. You also have a small diagram there that would show you how we plan to use that space in the front of the building for those assignments. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions for Chief Crispin regarding this proposal? Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, if that would be a call, when someone calls in and during that conversation, if they still requested for an officer to come to their location for whatever reason, that option is still obviously available, and they will still be able to dispatch someone to the citizen.
Absolutely, Mr. Brancher. And the other thing as well, if the teleserve officer begins to take that information and finds out more information than what perhaps communications had, and the officer says, well, clearly this doesn't need to be handled over the phone, I need to dispatch a unit, you need a criminal investigator, then he or she could make that designation as well.
Okay.
Good question. Sounds like an excellent service, and hopefully would free up some of our officers' time for just what you currently described, where you need a criminal investigator there. Any other questions or comments regarding this proposal? If not, you have this recommendation of the Chief of Police and where the funding is going to come from. Do we have a motion?
So made. Second.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Thank you, Chief. At this time, we'll consider recommendations of the Public Information Officer grant writer with regards to application for federal stimulus, ARRA, money from the Federal Department of Energy's Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant, EECBG program. You have a copy attached, and Mr. Schaffner, you can just pick up anywhere you want to on that. Explain all those letters and block grants and everything else, if you will. Nice to see you.
I bring to you tonight a recommendation that should our application be approved, it has not yet, you accept a Department of Energy block grant totaling $961,100. No match is required, and the funds will be used to rehabilitate and upgrade City Hall's lighting and aging HVAC systems. This money is, as the mayor said, this money is part of President Obama's federal American Recovery and Reinvestment Act stimulus money. The particular allocation that we're applying for is known as the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. We learned of our eligibility earlier this year, and then City Manager Roger Haley instructed us to make application and pursue the funding. The window of opportunity was pretty tight, but we were able to get the application in by June 18. Like I mentioned, we haven't received any official word about this of the award, but there are indications that an official announcement may be coming very soon. If you choose to accept the money, we will be bringing to you for consideration all contracts related to this project in the future. Mr. Gary Whitaker is here. He's the Building and Codes Director and is knowledgeable a person as I know about City Hall's mechanical systems. And he's here to answer any questions about the project that you may have. I can answer questions for you about the application process.
All right, any questions for Mr. Schaffner or for Mr. Whitaker, who's here? Thank you for being here, Mr. Whitaker. If you have any questions, now would be a good time regarding this grant application.
Well, Mayor, I'm sure if we receive this grant, we will have more information coming in the future of how we're going to break this up, and particularly what direction we're going to go versus lighting and the HVAC and different things like that. I know we have a lot of options to look at. I know there's been talk of the new LED lights, and we've looked at those, and those are exciting and to give us a better quality light and less cost. So I know there's a lot of different ways to look at that, and hopefully we'll get this award. We'll be able to utilize that.
There will be more information coming on that.
Other questions or comments?
Mayor, seeing no other questions, I move for approval.
Second.
All right, you have a motion and second that should we be so honored that we accept this grant from the Department of Energy. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Coffey. Mr. Whitaker. This time we'll consider recommendations of the city manager regarding a proposal from Chartwell Consulting for implementation services of the defined contribution pension plan and also the National League of Cities prescription drug discount card. And you have a copy attached to both those. Mr. Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor Bragg. This is the next step in the implementation of the defined contribution plan. That will be the pension plan for employees of the city hired after July 1st, 2010. The next step for that is going to be to find a vendor to manage the investments of the employees, provide education and communication of the investment options for our employees, and then to handle all of the record-keeping and administration of that new plan. As you know, the city's had a long relationship with Chartwell Consulting. They have done this in many instances for other clients in terms of finding a vendor to manage their plan. Because Chartwell is very familiar with the city, very familiar with our staff, we are recommending that we use them to issue the RFP for this new vendor. What this will involve is the drafting of an RFP, review obviously by the pension committee, reaching out to vendors who potentially could provide this, and then assisting the pension committee in selecting a vendor that ultimately will be brought to you for selection. So the cost of this would be $10,000 plus travel expenses, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Lyons? I'm very pleased that you're moving forward with this because it is a change, and certainly you're going to have people who will come to work with the city, and they'll need to understand how their funds can be utilized and where they can go. Any questions for Mr. Lyons on this proposal?
Mayor, seeing none, I move we approve the recommendations of the city manager.
Second.
All right, you have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Seeing none, please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye.
The next item I have is a prescription drug benefit card. This is, I think, a real win-win for both the city and for our residents. The National League of Cities, which is an organization that the city of Murfreesboro is a member of, has partnered with Caremark to offer a prescription drug benefit card that is at no cost to our residents. Essentially how this would work is once City Council would give a blessing for this program, we would enroll in the program. Again, no fee to the city to do this. And after they ramp up and develop some discount cards, Murfreesboro residents can come in, pick up a card, and then use this card at participating pharmacies and receive an average savings of 20% off their medication versus the retail cost. Now, this will be especially beneficial for Murfreesboro residents who do not have health insurance or perhaps don't have a drug card benefit or a drug benefit. So we see this as a real opportunity for them to save money. I did do a search on the website and found 74 pharmacies within 20 miles of Murfreesboro that participate in this. All of the major pharmacies as well as our local pharmacies are all participants in this program. So if you've got health insurance and you've already got a drug benefit, this cannot be used over and above and on top of that. But it really, I think, is designed for those folks who may need some assistance on saving on their prescription meds. NLC has told me that it takes about 8 weeks to get this ramped up. And the way the program would work is these cards would be printed up with the city's logo on it and a number. The resident would come in and pick up a card. They don't give any information to the city about who they are, their address. The city of Murfreesboro will get no medical information on any of the people participating in the program. The only information we'll get back from National League of Cities is the savings provided cumulatively for our residents. So we see this as a real opportunity to perhaps help some folks, and I would recommend your approval.
Sounds like a great benefit for our residents, Mayor. I would move we approve the recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. A motion and second. Any questions? If not, call the roll, please, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider for adoption a resolution regarding an interlocal cooperation agreement for emergency communications between the Rutherford County Emergency Communications District and the City of Murfreesboro. Ms. McGannon?
Mayor Bragg, members of the council, the 911 Board has asked that the city enter into an interlocal cooperation agreement. The agreement is attached to the resolution, and if you look on the second page of the agreement, the city's responsibilities under the agreement are limited to providing dispatchers meeting the minimum requirements for training in accordance with state law. The agreement imposes, other than non-discrimination, which would be city practice anyhow, no other responsibilities on the city. The majority of the responsibilities are on the district, and they have requested it and made it a condition for grant receipt, and so I recommend that we agree and get the money.
Are there any questions on this resolution? If not, is there a motion that we accept this resolution?
So moved. Second.
All right, you have a motion to adopt the resolution. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Beer permit applications. Ms. Wright.
There are two tonight, Mayor. One is from the Clarion Inn and Suites, which has experienced an ownership change, and they have met all of our requirements. The second is for World Market. They already have an on-site permit, off-site permit for consumption. They're asking to have on to that an on-site permit so they can have beer tastings, and they have met all of our requirements.
All right, both of these meet the requirements. Is there a motion that we accept?
So moved.
Any volunteers?
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. You have before you a list of the statements to be considered for payment. Are there any questions regarding these statements? If not, is there a motion that we pay the bills?
Pay the bills.
Second.
All right, you have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Mr. Blake Smith has resigned from our Construction Board of Adjustments and Appeals, and I recommend to you that John E. Murray, and you have a questionnaire before you regarding Mr. Murray. I recommend that Mr. Murray be appointed to the Construction Board of Adjustments and Appeals.
Move we accept the mayor's recommendation.
Second.
All right, you have a motion, second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Before we get into other business, I want to remind everyone about the garbage pickup date change for roughly the Mitchell-Nielsen area, our traditional neighborhood around Mitchell-Nielsen School, roughly from Medical Center Parkway, the old Loki Lane, to Battleground Drive, to Northfield, and then Memorial. It's roughly a square. On October the 5th, your pickup date will change. We've tried to notify everyone on the carts. If you have questions, please call 893-3681, which is our solid waste department. Roughly the traditional neighborhood around the Mitchell-Nielsen schools for a date change on garbage pickup, trying to even out the days for our solid waste trucks to go around and have about the same number of pickups in each area on each day. If there are any questions, 893-3681. Is there any other business from the staff or council to come before the council at this time. Ms. McGannon.
Mayor, thank you. In accordance with the letter that I presented to the council at the beginning of the meeting, we would recommend to you that you adopt, effective immediately, a 9-month moratorium on a new kind of sign. The city staff has just become aware of a new technological development that may impact signage in the community. Before there was any use of that technology, it seemed appropriate that additional information be gathered and shared with the Planning Commission so they could determine whether this would be appropriate for our community and or not, or if it needed some limitation, and what the city's sign ordinance currently would say about this type of sign. So the request is that there be a moratorium prohibiting in Murfreesboro any automated changeable signs other than those which have traditionally been described, classified, and understood to be flip matrix, segmented, or scrolling signs. This moratorium would specifically prohibit any kind of changeable sign that is composed of or includes so-called digital ink or dig ink or mag ink, by whatever name it may be called, or any kind of reflective film or film-like material, regardless of how same may be applied, which allows an image to change or be changed or altered by computer-generated digital impulses, and would ban the issuance of any permits for any such sign in Murfreesboro. It's staff's belief and expectation that this study by staff and the Planning Commission, so that the recommendation can be made to the council and the council can take any action it deems necessary, should be able to be achieved in less than 9 months. But we did not want to rush to judgment about this. It is information which has just newly come to our attention, and so we are recommending to you that you take that action to allow information and deliberation to occur.
Any questions?
Mayor, I would just say that with any new technology that comes about, that it's only appropriate that the city and staff do the due diligence that we need to make sure it's something that's going to be appropriate for the city. And as Ms. McGannon said, if the study can be done and everything can be evaluated shorter than 9 months, certainly we'll be able to consider it sooner than that. But I think this is an appropriate measure to take at this time. And I would move we approve her recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Gilly. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any questions on the motion for a 9-month moratorium on a new sign type, perhaps, that we'll find out about? If there are no questions, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Any other business from the staff or the council to come before the council at this time? If not, you are adjourned.